Hello, everyone, and welcome to this session of the Amazing Care Network. We're delighted you're here. Before I introduce a topic of great interest to me, which is Ayurvedic medicine, and a terrific speaker in Susan Fickinger, allow me first to introduce myself and our organization. I am Cora Tellez, and I founded the Amazing Care Network about 5 years ago in response to issues that I was facing on a personal level. And I learned much later that a whole lot of friends and other people face them too. And it has to do with how we age, how we do it in a way that gives us control and independence for as long as possible. So I'm 72 years old. I'm a baby boomer. And you know, control is all about baby boomers. And so before COVID, our group, this membership organization, would meet in 4 cities. I would invite speakers to talk about a variety of topics, ranging from financial management of our assets, to how to find caregivers, to how to identify a home that we would move to when we can no longer take care of ourselves. And the speakers were great. It was wonderful. Then COVID hit, and it put an end to those in-person meetings. And so instead, what we did was to host webinars. And I would interview interesting speakers about a variety of topics. And today marks one of those sessions. I'm also happy to tell you that next month in June, we will start our in-person meetings. And I will start that in Honolulu, followed closely by Los Angeles, Oakland, and San Diego. But for now, I am just delighted to introduce to you a topic called Ayurvedic medicine. So I grew up in Western medicine. You know, I spent a whole lot of my professional career running health insurance companies. And so frankly, I knew very little about Ayurvedic medicine. But I do know that there's a mind-body connection that Western medicine has also come to embrace. And by golly, the sages of India have discovered it long, long time ago. And so I just fortuitously got to meet Susan, who has been in this business or involved in this approach for over 20 years. So Susan is an Ayurvedic lifestyle educator, yoga and meditation teacher. She's also the founder of her own company called Wise Soul Ayurvedic and Wellness, Ayurveda, please forgive me, which is a wellness coaching and retreats company. So Susan has dedicated much of her professional life to this, and we'd love to learn more. So let me begin, Susan, by asking you, first, how did you get involved with this? And why has it sustained your interest? Susan.
Well, thank you for that wonderful introduction and a beautiful summary of Ayurvedic medicine in general. So I think you do know more than you're giving yourself credit for. But, you know, I first learned about Ayurveda well over a decade ago, maybe 15 going on 17 years ago. But before that, I think I was always interested in all things health and wellness. You know, growing up, my mother was a nurse, so much more traditional Western medicine, but she had a strong emphasis on healthy eating. We never had processed foods. You know, I was the kid that, you know, all my friends, I'd be jealous. They'd have Pop-Tarts and wingdings, and nobody would want to trade for my apple, you know. And on my father's side, his grandfather had a farm. So they kind of grew up doing, you know, farm to table food, natural remedies, salves from herbs, well before that was kind of in vogue, you know, like some of the trends in restaurants and things like that today. So, you know, I always had that upbringing, but it really wasn't until I became a parent myself and started to really appreciate how the lifestyle of the family impacts all of its members, right? I think I was using the term health style in the 90s when my kids were little. I don't think I coined the term, but it made such sense to me, you know, that it's not just about lifestyle, it's about our health style. You know, but in terms of actual Ayurveda, I was introduced to it through yoga. It's called the sister science of yoga. And, you know, as I said, maybe 15 years ago, and I did adopt some of the practices then. And they really resonated with me. But it wasn't until a few years ago when I started to really think about my own personal aging. And as I entered into this phase of life, into my 50s, and into thinking about, how do I sustain my health and continue to age with grace and, hopefully optimal well-being, that's when I dove in and decided I wanted to go back to school and get some more education about this practice. And I studied through the Chopra Center in San Diego and got this Ayurvedic lifestyle counselor or coach degree. And I have pretty much been sharing this practice and this beautiful teachings with people ever since. And sometimes one-on-one through workshops and retreats. And people always ask me, do you not believe in Western medicine? How does this fit? And I absolutely 100% revere, honor, rely on, traditional Western medicine, especially for, if there's trauma or an acute situation. But for most of the time, I sort of think of, I want to have some control over my health. And I'd like to be in the driver's seat a bit. So I think of it as, prevention versus medication or whatever. And I think if your viewers are listening right now, your members who are interested in this topic, they probably have that same mindset too. And this is what Ayurveda is all about. It's really connecting with yourself, knowing yourself, and when there might be imbalances within your mind-body system, and catching those and reversing those before they become perhaps a major dis-ease within the body system, which can create illness, as we know. So that's a little bit of background. This probably resonates with you too, Cora?
Very much. Yeah, we all have different life journeys, don't we?
Oh, gosh.
We're all after the same goal, which is healthy aging for as long as we possibly can. And I just applaud that you were willing to take on and be curious about other forms of approaching it. What is it about Ayurveda medicine the Ayurveda approach that particularly appeals to you?
Well, great question. One of the main principles of Ayurveda that really, really resonates with me is that health is not just about the absence of disease. It's so much more. It's health is our natural state of being. It's the ability for our mind-body system to self-regulate and return us to balance, which in a medical term is called homeostasis. And to me, this is sometimes what's missing in healthcare and health today, certainly in our culture and in the United States. And with Ayurveda, it's not just so much about getting by, but it's really about thriving and enjoying the experience of life. I saw a statistic that said the average American health lifespan is around 78 years old. Now, this was pre-pandemic, so it may have even decreased a bit, but the average health span, which is defined as the number of years we have before we start to have issues with due to aging that might have chronic, problems, degeneration, is 66 years. So that's a big gap between 78 and 66, right? So I have found in studying Ayurveda and working with people that very simple choice changes, little shifts in our daily choices, can really impact that quality of life and that health span. And it personally certainly has for me. I feel like adopting these practices and really sticking to them over the last maybe 5 or 6 years, I certainly have less stress or a better ability to cope with the stress in my life. I sleep better. I feel my immune system is stronger, certainly, with the pandemic, knock on wood, but I've sort of skirted that. But more than that, even just an overall appreciation for the intelligence of my mind-body system and allowing that innate intelligence of that system to sort of do its thing, right? So this is why I've been so passionate about it and have sustained this interest, and why I feel so passionate about sharing it. And my hope is that I can help people discover their own inner healers within themselves, because it's there. We just have to get in touch with it, right? Yeah.
So Susan, I know you've studied a great deal about Ayurveda, and I know we can't possibly cover it all in this period of time, but what are the key principles that we should know about this approach?
Yeah. Well, first of all, as you said in your introduction, which was wonderful, it's a 5,000-year-old functional medicine system that originated in India. And it's made up of two Sanskrit words. And I tell you this just because people sometimes are afraid to even say the word because it's not English, it's Sanskrit, which is an ancient language. Ayu is the first part, which means life. And Veda means science or knowledge. So put together, it's the science of life or knowledge of life. And again, when I talk to people and they don't want to parrot the word, I always say to remember how to say it, it's Ayurveda. So that's just right off the bat, Ayurveda. And there's a couple principles that to set the foundation here and do a little Ayurveda 101 that we sort of have to establish from the perspective of the creation of this system. The first and foremost, which you sort of mentioned, is that it's a holistic, conscious-based approach, meaning that mind, body, and spirit are all connected. And also these ancient sages believed that we're not just the body and we're not just the thoughts or the mind, but we're the awareness behind those things. And from this awareness, from this place that you can kind of tap into, and some people call it spirit, some people call it intuition, from this place of knowing is where we can make shifts in our physiology and where that connection between the mind and the body takes place. There's a lot of talk about mind-body these days, but you have to go behind that place to be able to make the connection, right? It's also experiential, meaning that you have to become an active participant in your own health. You can't kind of just source it out. I always say you have to tend to your own garden. Sometimes you have to pull out some weeds, but you have to get in there, know yourself, and it's not enough to just know about Ayurveda. You actually have to participate and do some of the practices, which are very simple. And that's what I love about it. Ayurveda teaches that optimal health starts with disease prevention. And the way we do that is through shifting our daily experiences. And those can be experiences about the type of work we do, the relationships we have, the food we eat, the amount of sleep we get. And as we shift these experiences, our biology can shift because according to Ayurveda, our biology is just the metabolism of our experiences, right? That was an epiphany when I learned that, how well we can assimilate and transmute our daily experiences is kind of how well we thrive, right? If we're not doing a great job, and if we're throwing toxic things at ourselves, then we can't possibly, handle them sometimes. So, these are some of the principles I like to say. And what I love to remember and remind ourselves is our bodies are constantly changing. They're just a snapshot in time at any given moment, right? We know the cells renew, different cells within the body, sometimes 7 days, sometimes 30 days. But, it's just amazing that with our science has shown, research has shown that with some of these changes, we can actually impact our aging and our wellness as we move forward. So to me, these are some of the principles that I think are just key and fascinating. And again, fascinating that 5,000 years ago, they were talking about these things, right? Yeah.
Fantastic. Yeah. Well, I find particularly compelling this idea that change is possible, that you're not imprisoned in sort of where you are today, even though you may be in pain, it's debilitating pain, but there are changes one can make.
Absolutely.
I'm curious, in your practice, Susan, what have been experiences that you could share with us about how this has changed your clients' lives?
Absolutely. There's many benefits. And, again, this could just be an hour lecture on the benefits of Ayurveda. But I would say first and foremost, and Ayurvedic doctors often tout this, is a decreased dependence on medications. So, that is one thing that if I don't have to take a pill and there's other alternatives that I can learn about, because, when we take a medication, and sometimes we have to, and we're so grateful for science and that they're available to us. But if we can do some of the steps and try some of the alternative approaches, why not give it a shot, right? But it has been shown 100% to reduce the dependence on medications. Also to reduce inflammation within the body. And we know markers of inflammation impact so many other, systems within the body and can start to lead us onto, degeneration of all kinds. Certainly can help improve intolerance with glucose and type 2 diabetes, obesity, which is just an epidemic in our society today. Can help lower blood pressure through things like meditation and mindfulness and stress and coping with stress. Really helpful is with IBS and GI tract issues, because one of the principles of Ayurveda is that nutrition is one of the primary ways we can rebalance our system. So Ayurvedic nutrition is huge. And we find that when you go to an Ayurvedic doctor, an Ayurvedic practitioner, many times they want to learn about your GI tract and your gut health and sort of set you on course for that. And on the emotional side, it can certainly help decrease anxiety, help with depression. And I think even too, from an emotional perspective, it can help us with struggles of feelings of connection and even feelings of purpose, because we sort of are really tapping into our true selves and our true nature more. And from a perspective of aging, this is really fascinating to me. There's research out there now that tell us that the end of our chromosomes are little bits of DNA called telomeres. And I'm, again, not an Ayurvedic doctor, not a medical doctor. So my explanation might be very simplistic, but I think of them as the caps on the end of a shoelace, right? These little telomeres at the end. And research has shown these caps to be a biological marker for aging. And what they've seen is that as we age, these telomeres shorten, but we can prevent them from shortening by lifestyle choices, such as, healthful eating, relaxation, getting enough sleep. So, this is breaking, leading edge science that is showing us that our lifestyles can impact our aging and prevent premature death and some of the degeneration that happens in the mind-body system naturally as we age. So I think all of these benefits are super compelling. Again, I could talk for hours on this subject, but there are, I could point you to the Chopra Foundation website for, if somebody wants to geek out and get more information on the benefits of Ayurveda, I would say that's a good source. So,
Susan, you said in an earlier comment that Ayurveda requires us to be active participants in our own health. So tell our audience, what does that mean on a daily basis? What are daily practices that you would say to us? Do this because it's good for you, or it's very much in keeping with the Ayurvedic approach to healthy living.
Exactly. Well, one of the things, I'll just take a step back and say that, one of the differences between Western medicine and Ayurveda is that an Ayurvedic doctor doesn't approach us from the perspective of maybe the symptoms that we're presenting with or the disease. If I show up and I have hypertension, I have high blood pressure, the Ayurvedic doctor will not look up what are the symptoms of high blood pressure and how should I treat the high blood pressure. They're going to look at Susan, the whole person. And one of the ways they do that is they determine what our basic mind-body type is. And that's based on very similar to traditional Chinese medicine, is based on what makeup I have in my body of 5 elements that are traditionally known in Ayurveda as space, air, fire, water, and earth. And these combined not only in our mind body physiology, but in everything in the natural world that we can experience. So an Ayurvedic doctor will make an assessment based on looking at our body frames, asking lots of detailed questions about us, what sort of type of person you fit into. And once you know this baseline, it's called your dosha. And anybody that knows even a little bit about Ayurveda always says, I sort of think I know what my dosha is. There's 3 main mind body types, and we can talk about that too. But once you know your dosha, you can then use that baseline knowledge to know how to balance out when you're accumulating too much of a certain element within your mind-body system. And there's a principle that like increases like. So if I happen to have a mind-body system that has predominantly air and space in it, lots of movement, lots of my hands going, talking fast. If I do things that increase more air and wind in my life, then I'm going to accumulate too much vata, and I might start to have symptoms associated with that. Cold, dryness, dry skin, dry hair, cold extremities. So I would need the opposite. So to get back to your question, I had to give a little example of that. To get back to your question, some of the things that I really recommend for myself and for people who are aging, because as we age, we enter into specifically a vata time of life, which is associated more with the qualities of space and air. When we're babies, we're very earthy, right? We're sort of building blocks, and we're concerned about growth and making ourselves it's the start of our lives. In the middle of our lives, we're dominated by fire and transformation. It's a time of doing, our careers, reproduction. Pitta is that time of life, and it's very dynamic and transformative. But when we enter the last third of life, according to Ayurveda, we enter into this vata phase, which is the air and space. So we start to dry out. We start to get sort of wispy. We can get a little foggy sometimes. So what I recommend, as I started to say, for some of my patients that are in my age or getting older, is first to sort of take advantage of this vata time of life when you're doing a little less and you're being a little bit more, right? It's a time when you can sort of get back in touch with yourself. So I start my clients, in this phase of life on a beautiful meditation and mindfulness practice right away. And that sort of helps us get in tune with our own knowing and our own, what's going on in my system, what's going on in my mind. And one of the things I find from my clients experiencing this is that it helps us be more mindful and stay connected to our bodies, so we don't do something like, fall or trip, because we're not as grounded as we need to be. So that's always one of my number one practices. And it's really the basic premise of all Ayurveda, is that you kind of have to sit with yourself, whether it's meditation or just a morning mindfulness as you sip your tea, or however you do it. So that's my number one. My number two, because we start to dry out a little bit and our skin and our hair gets dry, I recommend doing a self-massage with a warmed oil. In Ayurveda, this is called abhyanga. And it can take 5 minutes, or you can luxuriate in it and do it, 15 minutes. But you take some warmed sesame oil. You can add a little lavender oil or aromatherapy to it too. And I teach in workshops how to do this, but we usually start at the head and you do a gentle massage all throughout the face and the jawline. When we hit a joint, we do a circular motion. When you hit your muscles, you do a nice long stroke, all the way down to paying some attention to the feet. which tend to start to get dry and maybe a little rigid. So we massage. And this Abhyanga is so important because touch helps us ground, and it grounds the nervous system as well. So this is a practice that I recommend maybe once a week. And I think as somebody once taught me that the word for oil in Sanskrit literally translates to love. So I think of this anointing yourself with love and sort of compassion and tenderness. So it not only helps the skin, but it's helping us just, get back physically in touch with our bodies. And the third thing I'll say, again, for healthy aging is the impact of Vata in the mind-body system can oftentimes show up in a lot of dryness in the GI tract. And what that means is that we can get bloating, we can kind of sometimes have constipation. So Ayurvedic doctors recommend drinking a warm cup of water first thing in the morning. So after brushing your teeth, you take in this warm water. Again, Ayurvedic nutrition is big. The food to elimination system is really critical in Ayurveda. And if we can stimulate the elimination and keep that digestive tract healthy, that's something that is so important. And it doesn't mean, people that I tell this to, they say, oh, I have to have my morning coffee or my morning tea. That's fine, have it. But first start out with that warm water. Some people add lemon to that, which is wonderful. Watch the enamel on the teeth, though, just swish your mouth with water afterwards. But these are just 3 practices that I recommend for healthy aging. And there's many more to balance out the system that are game changers for me as well. But we can jump into something else or go back to that later. But these are 3 things that I have found personally that have really shifted the meditation, the oil massaging, and the drinking the warm cup of water. 3 very simple lifestyle shifts that have made a huge impact on me, I think, and just my overall quality of being, I would say. Yeah.
Thank you for that. So, Susan, not everyone might be interested in this. So let me ask you, from your practice, what are characteristics of folks for whom this is just not a good fit? Don't even go here, because you're just going to get frustrated or whatever. So do you have any thoughts on that?
If this just doesn't resonate with them at all, you're saying? Yeah, that's a really good question, because Ayurveda is never a one size fits all approach. And, I always say, lean in. One thing that Ayurveda is absolutely not is ever about diets or restrictions or can'ts. There's not a lot of rules. There's guidance, certainly, but it's all very intuitive. So I would say, I think as more and more research is affirming the benefits of things like mindfulness, meditation, getting more sleep, aligning with the rhythms of nature, as more and more of these things are being proven, I think Western doctors are incorporating them more and more, right, into their patient protocols. And so I think that, if I ever get somebody that digs their heels in and says, oh gosh, I'm not giving up my whatever, I always say, well, don't, pick something else. There's just so many things we can do. One of the biggest things, and people are very fascinated to learn about this, again, the elements, these 5 elements show up at different times of our lives. They show up at different times of our day, of the circadian rhythm of the 24-hour clock. And Pitta, which is dominated by fire, shows up during the day, kind of between the hours of 10 and 2. So that's when transformation and metabolism is at our highest, according to Ayurveda. So I always say to people, if you want to make one little shift in your life, try eating your largest meal at the day time. Because when we eat a big meal at night, a heavy meal right before bed, and science has confirmed this, we go to bed on a heavy stomach. What happens is all that transformation and energy goes to digesting our food instead of to deep cellular repair, which we know happens right during sleep. So that's a super simple thing. Think of your supper as your supplemental meal. And some people who, think all of this is, wacko, they say, oh my gosh, just having, just changing my meal from, big meal at lunch, a little soup at dinner, I am sleeping better. I feel refreshed when I get up. I don't have this bloggy feeling, heavy feeling. So some of this is just, I sort of give people a smorgasbord or, a whole buffet, and then they pick and choose what resonates. But that's a great question because, it can be like yoga, it goes on that sort of spiritual side sometimes. And it isn't for everybody. People could say 5 elements are in us, but again, more and more research is confirming, and I'll say one more thing. I don't want to keep talking too much, but there was just Pulitzer Prize winning medical research that came out called circadian medicine, which shows that we have these clock genes in our system that can turn on and off based on the 24-hour circadian clock, right? And one of the principles of Ayurveda that these sages talked about 5,000 years ago was aligning with natural rhythms of the circadian clock, right? So, I always joke that Western medicine is catching up to this 5,000-year-old system, right? So it's to me, it doesn't have to be too woo-woo because I think, some of these things are just intuitive. It's like my grandmother's, she would make these herbal salves for us when we got sick, or chicken noodle soup, right? Some of it is just the pendulum swinging back to sort of good old common sense about taking care of this miraculous body that we have. So yeah, great question though.
Great. So much of, I'll just draw on myself, that I had wanted to learn certain things. And it would be great, Susan, if you could point the way for our members who, after listening to you, would say, boy, I want to learn more. Where do I go for resources? And where is Susan anyway? Well, Susan is you're out of luck if you're in Honolulu, but maybe Susan has connections in Honolulu.
I could go to Honolulu. I could be persuaded. Yeah, for sure. Oh gosh. Well, my hope is always that I've inspired people. It's just my joy and my passion. And I always hope that I just sort of something that I say, a little tidbit resonates. And I would just say that, if I could just say even just one main takeaway is that the true aim of Ayurveda is to live in joy. And, that is our fundamental state of being. When we come here, think of it as babies or as little children, that awe of life, right? And we kind of lose that along the way. And that is the aim, truly. So, my intention, and even Deepak Chopra's intention, is always to help people set intentions of creating this joyful, energetic body, reflective, alert mind. He always talks about having a compassionate, loving heart and a lightness of being. So if any of those resonate and you want more, I would say there's just, a quick Google search, even of Ayurveda books, will start to point you toward, you can start to get, even an Ayurveda 101 or whatever. I mentioned knowing your dosha. You can look at, Google, how do I know my dosha, or Ayurvedic quizzes for my dosha. And that's kind of fun to kind of know your mind body type and your, how much, of different elements are in you. And then I would also say that if at all you could ever take advantage of an Ayurveda spa treatment or go on a retreat, that's kind of a deep immersive situation where maybe you go away for 3 or 4 days and they do detoxing, very, very gentle. And you sort of immerse yourself in that. I know that they are starting to pop up more and more across the United States. You no longer have to go to India, to have an Ayurvedic massage or experience. But in terms of reaching out to me, my website is wisesoulayurveda.com. And all this I've talked about, I have blogs there that dive a little deeper into this. All that information is there. And I am always so happy when somebody reaches out to me, so happy to give information or chat with someone. I always offer, a free phone consultation, just to, sometimes it's somebody needs to find an Ayurvedic doctor in their area. And that is not me. I'm not a licensed doctor. So I'm always happy to point them in the direction of somebody I know too. So I would say those are great ways, which I absolutely welcome. So
fantastic. Well, Susan, on behalf of our members and everyone watching this, I want to thank you so much. I've gotten a lot out of it. Among the first things that come to mind when I think about Ayurveda and you is self-care. And I just want you to know that that's a takeaway for me. It's a form of self-care. And absolutely. All of us can resonate and can wrap our heads around self-care. And
that's beautifully said. Yes, I agree. That's a perfect way to summarize it.
Great. Well, thank you. And thank you everyone who's joined us. I look forward to seeing you in one of the cities that we're going to be presenting. And perhaps we can lean on Susan to come to one of those sessions and present in person. Wouldn't that be cool?
Very fun. And thank you so much, Cora.
Thanks again.